that was in that European security strategy, that US security strategy about Europe. He said that its immigration policy is a disaster. He said many European countries may no longer be viable in the future. And he said that most European countries are decaying.
Now, every Tuesday we head to the United States to find out what's happening in Washington, where Lara Spirit is our woman cartwheeling through the corridors of power. Hello, Lara.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us, Lara. Let's start off by talking about what's going on with Washington and Europe, because Donald Trump had some more harsh words for Europe after he found out that Elon Musk's X was being fined 120 million euros by the EU for breaching online content rules.
Elon has not called me to ask for help in that one. But no, it's a tough thing. I don't think it's right. No, I don't think it's right. I don't see, how they can do that. No, I'm not. I'll speak about it later. I'm going to get a full report on it. Look, Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions.
Well, this follows the White House's security strategy published last week, which claimed Europe faces civilizational erasure and points towards a break between the close alliance between the US and Europe that has existed, of course, for over a century. Lara, specifically the Elon Musk and X angle here. The EU says that X broke transparency rules, but Musk is claiming it's a freedom of speech issue. How likely is it that Donald Trump is going to ride in to save his old friend Elon Musk, or at least try to? Because, it's quite hard to know what the relationship between those two men is today.
Yeah, and obviously they had a reconciliation, particularly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the late right-wing activist. I think in this case, it was quite obvious from that clip that President Trump hadn't yet properly heard, or at least wasn't yet fully informed of that fine, suggesting perhaps that it wasn't really something that was considered very high salience in the White House, at least until yesterday. We did have remarks from both Marco Rubio and JD Vance, the vice president, in opposition to that fine from the European Commission, suggesting that those two MAGA hopefuls and deputies to President Trump did have very firm views about this and were going to stand with X over the European Union on this point, and were quite happy to make it a censorship issue actively.
Lara, look, you've been in Washington a while now. You obviously know Europe as well. This is a continent with its problems. We're in a country, I'm in a country with its problems, but it's not the hell zone that people on the US right seem to be in love with painting it as. What's your perspective on why they do that and what's really going on for them? Do they really believe it, or is it about making a domestic argument?
They do really believe it. And I think it's important to say that when you speak to MAGA people in Washington, they seem genuinely sympathetic when they say to you that you can't go out in London anymore, for example. And that is something that you hear time and time again from people in DC. I will also say that President Trump has just done an interview with Politico that was published this morning, where he reiterated quite a lot of the language that was in that European security strategy, that US security strategy about Europe. He said that its immigration policy is a disaster. He said many European countries may no longer be viable in the future. And he said that most European countries are decaying. There was also a very active attack on Sadiq Khan, of course, the London mayor, saying he was horrible, he was incompetent, he was vicious, he was disgusting, he's done a terrible job. Trump said, London's a different place. I love London, and I hate to see it happen. I think one of the big questions, or outstanding questions from this strategy, given that in other parts of the strategy, it was kind of lauding the values of non-interference in others' politics, is exactly what the Trump administration would be prepared to do in Europe by way of intervention to rectify what it seems, as you say, civilization erasure of, or the risk of. He was asked by Politico about this, and he said that he might get involved by endorsing politicians in future elections. He'd mentioned the fact that in the past he's endorsed Viktor Orban, for example, Hungary's strongman leader, of course. So I think that's kind of one of the big questions for Europe now. Is there's been a lot of tough talk, and I should say in this interview as well, really a really strong rebuke of President Zelensky in the Ukrainian position as well, saying that, at some point size will win, generally referring to Russia and accusing Zelensky of not actually having fully read the latest draft of the peace plan. So clearly a perilous time in the minds of some European diplomats at the moment, but still many outstanding questions.
And if you say to somebody in Washington, Lara, that you're considerably safer walking down a street in London or Paris or Berlin than you are in, for example, Washington, what do they say? Do they just not believe you?
They don't. They just simply don't. They just simply don't believe you. They don't think that you're being that. That it's not like they get very defensive or angry at you for saying something like that. And you do often point that out. Basically any American city has crime statistics, or major American city that are kind of worse in some respects than London or other European cities. But I think they've seen a lot of reports from London, a lot of reports of violence from London, and they think that it is a city that has fallen a very long way, and they find that very sad. And it is just something. I remember having a conversation with a Republican staffer who said that he'd been mocked by some friends when he came to London, and he asked them where the no-go areas were, because in some American cities, he said there are places that you can't go because they're not safe. And his friend said, well, you can actually walk pretty much anywhere in London, you're fine. And he simply didn't really believe it, and he didn't really understand why he was being mocked by these friends, or at least gently chided. And so I think that is an experience that quite a few in Washington have.
Yeah, very strange. Look, let's move on. A group of 12 former FBI agents are suing the agency and its director, Kash Patel. Why are they doing this?
Yeah, it's a dozen of these agents. They were fired this year for having knelt during a racial justice protest during 2020, and they're arguing that they have been unjustly punished for trying to de-escalate a situation. They kneeled during those protests. And I think one of the reasons it's important is because Kash Patel, the FBI director, has been in something of hot water in recent weeks. There was a leaked report that criticised his leadership. It also included some potentially embarrassing allegations about, including that, before one press conference after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, he didn't want to get out of the car or the plane until he was given one of those FBI jackets. Now, he has very strongly denied that. He said he was presented one of these jackets. Perhaps more worryingly, there's been a series of reports about his girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins, who is a country music singer and another sort of, MAGA faithful individual who it's claimed that Kash Patel has ordered a very elite SWAT team to escort one of her friends home after nights out in Nashville on more than one occasion, and also, to take Kash Patel to a kind of show that she was doing as well. And I think he's been under some criticism for his use of the FBI jet, particularly given that he was previously critical of predecessors for their use of the FBI jet.
Is his position tenuous? Is Trump considering replacing him?
So there was a report that suggested that might be the case, and it was firmly denied by the White House. There was a picture of Patel and Trump that was put out, and the White House firmly denying any suggestion that he is in hot water at the moment.
Okay, and look, finally, Lara, then this is the most important story of the day. JD Vance has claimed that he has US size 13 feet, which would be a 12.5 in the UK. He told an audience a story in which he and Marco Rubio and an unnamed politician were discussing something very important with President Trump in the Oval Office, but the president decides to stop the meeting so he can buy everyone new shoes. Listen to this.
So he says, Marco, what's your shoe size? And Marco's apparently an 11.5. He says, JD, what's your shoe size? My shoe size is 13. And he asked this politician, who I won't embarrass, what his shoe size is, and he says 7. President, he kind of leans back in his chair and says, you can tell a lot about a man by his shoe size.
Is it just me, Lara, or is the size 12.5 really quite large for feet? Or am are people now going to be telling a lot about me by my shoe size? 10.5. Let's not make a big deal out of it.
I'm not going to pretend, Hugo, to know that much about men's shoe sizes. And actually, I find it even more confusing given that they're different US shoe sizes to UK shoe sizes. But obviously, the story suggests that President Trump is like some American presidents in history, even if apocryphal, like Lyndon Johnson, fond of commenting or suggesting that the shoe size might be analogous to something else.
JD Vance, and we're talking height here, is a surprisingly tall man, although he somehow sort of presents as a small man, isn't he?
He is very tall. Yeah, he's a very tall man. Yeah.
Well, look, do get in touch if you wear size 13 shoes and you don't think it's weird at all. Thank you very much indeed, Lara Spirit. Always a pleasure to speak to you, as ever. I didn't even ask your shoe size, but I don't really feel like I need to know.